Hi everyone, it's Laura here and welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's video I'm going to show you how to create a peek-through card using a die by Concord&9th and stamps by My Favorite Things. As a first step, I started working on my card base. I have some heavyweight white cardstock that I cut at 5.5 by 8.5 inches and I scored at 4.25 inches. And I am going to use the peek-through pattern dies by Concord&9th to die cut the word friend from the front of the card. I am using some Heffy Doodle memo tape to secure the die in place, and then I can run everything through my die cutting machine. And the fun characteristic of this die is that it's not going to cut out the word friend completely, but it's going to leave it attached to the panel you die cut it from, so that you can create a peek-through pattern or a peek-through card like I'm going to do today. In order to add some stability to the panel and to create some extra detail, I'm going to glue some acetate at the back of the friend die cut. I used some double-sided tape by scrapbook.com on the sides of the die cut, and then I'm using some Nuvo Deluxe adhesive on the word friend itself. And this way I can secure the acetate strip behind my die cut word friend. The idea behind this card was to create a scene that would be sort of continuous on the outside and on the inside of the card. So for that I decided to create some grassy borders. I am using the My Favorite Things Grassy Fields Die-namics die, and I die cut two different borders. One will go on the front of my card and one will go on the inside. I am now going ahead and gluing down the two grassy borders, but with hindsight I would tell you to wait until a little bit further down in the card making process, because I will be adding some stamped detail to the front of the card, and also I wanted to create a cloudy sky on the inside of the card. At this stage I figured out that this grassy border was going to be in the way for me to use the stencil. But for the one that I have stuck on the front of the card, I will have to find a different solution, and we will get to that later on. For the cloudy sky, I am using a stencil by My Favorite Things and Distress Oxide in Peacock Feathers. Because I want a really soft blend, I am not using my blending foams, but I am using some blending brushes by scrapbook.com. These are really nice to use and help you get a really soft and really smooth blend. I am starting with the brush on the stencil and then brushing towards the paper. I never put down my brush on the paper first, because that way it's easier to get spots and splotches, whereas by starting on the stencil it's easier to get a softer result. Here I'm going to use some Heffy Doodle memo tape to mask off the other section of the inside of the card, because I don't want to add ink accidentally there. And once I'm done with my ink blended sky, I can move on and start working on my images. The stamp set I am using today is the Tweet Friends by My Favorite Things. It's absolutely adorable and I've had it in my stash for a while, and I was so excited to finally be able to use it. I stamped it with My Favorite Things Black Licorice Hybrid ink on Neenah Solar White 110 pounds cardstock, and then I colored it with my Nuvo markers. These markers are relatively new to me. These are alcohol-based, so in that sense they are similar to Copics and Spectrum Noir markers. They have a bullet tip and a chisel tip, and they come in packages of 3 that you can blend with each other, so they are sold in blending families. I am still practicing with these markers and I am exploring color combinations, but I can tell you now that I am enjoying coloring with them and I really like the colors that are available. For this first bird here, I used markers number 443, 436 and 433. I added my shading as if the light was coming from the top right of the screen, so that the darker areas are the ones on the left and on the lower part of the image. I wanted to keep the face and the belly of the bird white, so I just added a little bit of shading with markers number 485 and 487, and then I blended them out with the blender pen. For the beak, I used markers number 391, 405 and 403. And then I added a little bit of shading to the flower using some flicking motions and marker number 449. For the second bird, I decided to use some aqua colors. These are from the Aquamarine pack and are markers number 369, 363 and 360. And as you can see, I am scribbling the markers on the paper rather than using some flicking motions, because with these tiny circular motions, I create some texture which mimics the texture of feathers. And this way I can get away without having to draw the individual feathers, but the appearance of the birds is still fluffy. Again, I used some cool grays to shading the face and the belly of the bird, and the same oranges for the beak. And while I colored the rest of the images, I wanted to tell you a little bit more about this video. Today I am participating in the video hop to celebrate the milestone that my crafty friend Maaike recently reached. Her YouTube channel hit 3,000 subscribers, so first of all, congratulations Maaike. I will have a link to her YouTube channel in the description box down below. And to celebrate this happy event, she put together a video hop. The theme is friendship, and this is why I chose this stamp set and that fun die. And there are a lot of very talented crafters who joined the celebrations, and there are giveaways along the way. So make sure to hop along and to leave some love to all the channels that joined together to celebrate Maaike's 3,000 subscribers. And if you like, you can subscribe to those channels too. You can find a link to the next stop in the hop in the description box of my video on YouTube, where you will also find a list of all the products I used with links to the shops where you can get them in case you're interested. And now let's get back to the card. I colored the mushroom, the flowers and the leaves, and finally I colored the last bird with those same aquamarine colors, so markers number 369, 363 and 360. For all the images I kept the shading consistent with a light source coming from the top right of the screen. And then off camera I decided to stamp a few extra mushrooms and a few extra flowers and leaves, because I wanted to have enough elements for my scenes to be rich. And as I say many times, I prefer to do all my coloring in advance and to have some leftover images, rather than having to go back while I'm further ahead in the card making process and have to stamp and color extra images at that point. It does happen and it's not a big deal, but if I can avoid it, I would rather go that way. The Tweet Friends stamp set by My Favorite Things comes with matching dies, but because I don't have them, I went ahead and fussy cut everything with my EK Success Cutter B scissors. As I have mentioned in previous videos, I really like these scissors for fussy cutting. They were a real game changer for me. They are very sharp, so my hands don't get tired even if I cut watercolor cardstock, for example, which is really thick. And also they are really detailed, so it's not so hard to get in all those nooks and crannies in more detailed images. So I can definitely recommend them. Once I was done fussy cutting the images, I went ahead and stamped a sentiment on the inside of the card. I made sure it was positioned in a way such that when the card is closed, the sentiment is not visible from the outside. And then I went ahead and glued all the images to create the scene on the inside of the card. The sentiment also comes from the Tweet Friends stamp set by My Favorite Things, and I stamped it with My Favorite Things Black Licorice Hybrid ink, which is the same ink I had used on my images. I am trying to create some depth in the scene by adhering the smaller florals and leaves on the back and the larger images on the front, and tucking some of them behind the grassy border. Because I wanted to stamp a music note, but I wanted to make sure that that would not be visible through the peek-through pattern on the front of my card, I marked the opening on the card front with some Heffy Doodle memo tape, and then I went ahead and stamped my image. At this point, I was feeling that the card front was a little bit too plain, all white like that, so I decided to stamp a pattern on the card front as well. And this is why at the beginning of the video I told you that it would have been better if I hadn't glued the grassy border. But the way I went about that is I created a mask with my Heffy Doodle memo tape. I adhered it to some copy paper, I die cut the mask with that same Grassy Fields Die-namics by My Favorite Things, and then I could peel off the memo tape and use it as a mask. And this tape is great because it's low tack, so even when you run it through your die cutting machine, it's not going to stick to your paper so that you can remove it without fear of tearing. Once I had the masks in place, I could go ahead and stamp a background pattern using the Whimsical Waves stamp set by My Favorite Things and Distress Oxide in Worn Lipstick. And then I masked the front of the card so that I could add some color to the die-cut word friend using Distress Oxide in Worn Lipstick and my blending brushes by scrapbook.com. And because I backed the opening on the card front with some acetate, I can apply my Distress Oxide without having to mask the inside of the card. At this point, all I had to do was to fill in the scene on the front of the card, so I went ahead and adhered all the small images as well as the 2 leftover birds using my Nuvo Deluxe adhesive. I usually play around with the positioning of the elements beforehand, and then I finally go ahead and commit to that arrangement and glue everything down. I added some drop shadows under the mushroom and the birds using a light grey marker that was marker number 485, and then I blended that out with my blender pen. I did the same on the inside of the card, and once the markers will dry, the shadows will be much lighter than what you see on screen. I also decided that I wanted a bit more intensity in the color I had added to the word friend, so I went back in with my blending brush and Distress Oxide in Worn Lipstick, and I think the result is prettier this way. I buffed off the excess Distress Oxide that I had put down on the acetate. And then for a finishing touch, I added some Studio Katia iridescent crystals. I scattered them on the front of my card and I am gluing them down using a Duo picker and the Studio Katia glue. And I feel that these crystals add just the right amount of sparkle and detail to the front of the card. And here is the final result. I have to say that I really love the way this card turned out. This die by Concord&9th was just perfect for the friendship-themed video hop, and the stamps by My Favorite Things are so sweet, just irresistible. And that's it for today. If you guys enjoyed this video, please let me know in the comments below, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel. You can visit my blog for the full list of supplies, and I'll catch you guys soon with the next one. Ciao!